Welcome to the Grey Eye and Disability Arts online podcast, bringing together thoughtful discussion and debate. This month, Colin Hambrook, editor of Disability Arts Online, talks with musician and grassroots activist Dennis Queen about disability and activism. This podcast contains strong language.
So, Dennis Queen, it's great to meet up with you again. We're here at Sick Festival at the Lowry in Manchester, and we've had a really good couple of days, and we're going to talk for the podcast about disability and activism.
Okay.
When did you first get involved in disability activism? What was your very first action that you took part in?
I think I started as a kind of bit of a personal activist, so challenging the ableism, disableism was going on around us in our lives. And through that, I wanted to make contact with other disabled people, initially in relation to my child's impairments, actually. So I wanted to meet other people with similar impairments in order to get their advice, because I could see the advice I was getting from professionals and the other parents that I was being kind of steered to was a bad idea. And so through that and meeting other people with similar impairments to my child, I then very luckily bumped into an activist from the disabled people's movement who's involved in that impairment specific community. And she told me about the social model, which is obviously a massive awakening, as it is for a lot of disabled people, like a light going on and suddenly making sense of my whole life and my child's life and a lot of other stuff that was going on. And I joined Manchester Coalition of Disabled People, and through that involvement with the coalition I started a little bit of training to learn about the social model. And I then met so obviously then I was becoming involved in an activist organisation, but my first kind of what I feel was really getting involved in a campaign probably was a street protest, and it was after seeing I met people from Dan on I'd seen Dan on the wall.
Direct Action Network.
Yeah, the Disabled People's Direct Action Network, which was kind of going up till 2008, in a small way at least, less than it was in the 90s. I was fascinated with this picture of Dan. I could see it was a picture of what they call now a kettle. I always call it a corral by accident, but it was a picture of police surrounding disabled activists. And the only thing you could see of the disabled activists on one particular picture was things like, people's white canes and, wheels of wheelchairs kind of in between the feet of the police. And this was, to me, an absolutely fascinating image, this idea that the disabled people, who are usually seen as so harmless, could be seen as so threatening that they would need to be in this situation. And I couldn't get it out of my mind. I'd had a lot of anger in me about the prejudice and discrimination we've been facing as a family. And but at the same time, I thought Dan was like this really special group that, no one can join, and you have to be like some whatever, I don't know, like some special in crowd. It's a thing that a lot of people worry about. And I then met Dan at an arts event. So I went to, I think, the Independence Festival in Manchester, which will have been in the late 90s. It'll be 98 maybe, something like that. Yeah. And Dan were there, and they had a stall. And so I kind of sort of took myself up to the stall a bit anxious and kind of sort of looked at T-shirts and things, and everyone started chatting to me, and I was just like, oh my God, Dan's so cool, but how do you get involved? Can anyone join in? And they're like, obviously, as I know now, every campaigning organisation, it's all hands to the pump. So they're like, yes, please do get involved. No, there's no special qualification. And then I went on my first action in 1999. And that was a protest in Newcastle, mostly about institutionalisation, so against nursing homes and other institutions where we get locked away.
Yes, I went some of the actions in Newcastle. It was a bit later than that. It was early 2000.
Yeah. Those actions in Newcastle were great because we always had the Fugitives with us back then when they were still together. And they're such a great band, and their songs are so kind of challenging and fun to sing, and it was amazing, kind of parading through Newcastle with them. And so I actually first met most of the Danners outside in occupation. They were all inside, nearly everyone was inside, and the few that were still outside holding up the front of house were going. I arrived day 2, so day 1 they ended up on an overnight occupation. Most of Dan was inside. Some were outside doing front of house, and they'd gone home to bed in the evening. So I then met them in the morning while we were waiting to see what happened next, and if the activists were going to come out. So I kind of got to meet Dan while I was lying on the ground upside down from them, kind of with chalk drawn around me, being dead. And I can't remember why. We were talking about deaths in nursing homes, so there was a number of us lying on the ground. And so I kind of met everyone lying on my back, going, hi, you know, hi. I said I'd try and get here, and that was really good fun. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, for me, the point of going on actions like that was very much about disabled people's voices being heard, and changing people's minds.
Yes.
Although I have to say, in my own head, I'm never that sure about how successful we were at changing people's minds. What do you think
in Dan itself?
That? In making a point, in making a fuss, and challenging the institutions. And
I think it's difficult. I think often we have been restricted to simply making a point. I think that's really kind of the crux of it. I think there's a lot more to it for me and at least some other activists. So I think there's more to it than whether our action kind of achieves the massive change we were after always. So whilst that is great, and when we can get directly involved in negotiations and make actual change, which we have also done, that's really good and really important. I think there's a lot more to it than that. So for us, it's also about that personal experience of activists being there. And
being part of the community. Yeah,
being part of the community. But also I think the key is really what you first said just now, which is we're fighting back. And for a lot of people, that's the first time we've really sat down and challenged a powerful institution. So there are lots of other ways we do it in activism. But for those of us who like something a bit more, you know, in your face, I think it's incredibly empowering. I mean, I hate using that word because it's got so many funny connotations, and you know, I don't think we can really talk about empowering other people, but ourselves. I found it, especially in the first few years of activism, it really helped build me up as a person, helped me understand that I had power too, that I can fight back. It helped me fight back in my own life as well. So I often think that when people say, you know, do actions work? Do they achieve things? I'm like, well, I think they all achieve something. I don't think there's any bad action. I think there's always something gained from it, even if it's just by the people personally involved, but also the people who see us. So whilst, for example, when we were outside Scope, sticking fuck off Scope stickers all over them with the Direct Action Network, as an example, it is challenging, you know. So whilst Scope didn't change, Scope still haven't given over their organisation to disabled people or closed all their institutions or their segregated education support or any of this stuff. At least the people around at that time get to see something different, and for the first time it challenges their belief that, in this particular case, I'm talking about campaigning against large charities that aren't controlled by us, that maybe that what these charities are saying and doing isn't the only story, that maybe there's something else going on. And whilst, you know, F off Scope isn't the politest way to say it, it certainly makes them stop and go, whoa, what is going on here? And because I think the hardest thing about campaigning about charity is that most of the people who pay into charity are doing it for all the right reasons. They want things to be good for disabled people. They want our lives to be better. They don't, you know, they've heard we're suffering and they don't want us to suffer. Unfortunately, they're just being given what I think is the wrong way to fix it. And actually, you know, those people I tend to appeal to and just say, just accept us in your lives, welcome us in your workplace, treat us equally when you see us, don't pay the pound Scope. But at the end of the day, so even if it's only those few people in that local area who get to notice, I think every person does matter, because at least half of those people are going home to lives that include disabled people of all kinds, and they might have seen something today that helps them realise that we can fight back. And I think the fighting back thing is absolutely crucial. And I think whatever way we learn to do it, whether that's through protesting or through arts or through other kinds of activism and get involved in other campaigns, or through helping run organisations that are controlled by disabled people, all of these and lots of other ways, I think they all help us learn about fighting back. So that's not always been, to me, the crux of everything I do is about disabled people fighting back. If there was one phrase that I wanted to know that was the thing that I was doing and about, that would be it. Fight back in your own life, and if and when you're stable, help other people fight back. And
it's about agency, isn't it? And I think in that way, it's also, there is also an element of empowering people, of giving disabled people a chance to realise that they have agency, and that they can work to change things for the better in their own lives and in other people's lives. We're much stronger as a collective than we are as individuals.
That aspect of it's always really powerful. I think almost in anything that I get involved in that's organised by us, for us, is that feeling of being part of a community, and it's like coming away a bit more whole. I think when you've been doing it a long time, like me and you have now, because growing up, aren't we, darling, compared to when we first met, I was such a baby activist then, but like, I think it's less of a contrast for us. So I know in the first years, like sometimes, going home I would cry, or the next day I would cry, because you get to feel so powerful on a protest. You finally realise that you can make a difference. And then sometimes you're going back home to quite a difficult life, or immediately the next day being treated like crap and being treated like you have no power and feeling like you've got no power. That can be really hard. And I think the contrast is less now, with the sort of downside, that kind of little drop that some of us get afterwards. But so that's nice. Actually, the longer you're involved, you get less drop. But I think we still get that same feeling of power from being together. I think it's really important. It's I hate to use, again, another word I hate to use, inspiring, but being around each other inspires us to look within ourselves at the things that we struggle with and how could we make them better. So seeing other people, because we never have role models, there's never, or very rarely, any decent role models anywhere. So when we're together, everyone is everyone else's role model, and we all learn from each other. And especially as well, I think it's really important that the work we do is for people with all kinds of backgrounds, for people with all kinds of impairments, because we get so much more insight from being around people with different experiences as well. Because through that, we recognise then what is our common ground, what is the stuff.
Yeah, we recognise the barriers, because we have sort of varying impairments.
Time for a quick break to tell you about an upcoming Grey Eye production.
When a young man jumps in front of a train Cyrus is driving, the mysterious circumstances prompt him to search for answers. In pursuing the truth of Sonny's final hours, Cyrus is led to laundrette worker Christine as the past begins to catch up with people whose lives are changed forever. Hello. My name is Sheena Govan, and I'm playing the role of Nella in a new version of the powerful thriller One Under, a Grey Eye theatre company and Theatre Royal Plymouth production. Touring the UK this autumn, all performances will feature creative captioning and audio description. A tactile set model and other accessible resources will also be available. An evocative play about the power of guilt and the quest for atonement. Award-winning playwright Winsome Pinnock, known for Leave Taking and Rockets and Blue Lights, and acclaimed director Amit Sharma, whose previous productions for Grey Eye include The Solid Life of Sugar Water and Cosmic Scallies, join forces to explore the fragility of human relationships in this reimagining of One Under. Grey Eye are world-renowned for placing deaf and disabled artists centre stage. Visit greyae.org. GRAEAE.org for information and links to book tickets. All venues are accessible and welcome guide dogs. One Under deals with issues and topics which some audience members may find challenging. including depression, bereavement, paranoia and suicide. Suitable for ages 16 plus. One Under is commissioned by Ramps on the Moon and presented in association with Curve.
Being a wheelchair user, having brain damage and mental health issues from that are very different things. But there are similarities in the way that society disables us and pushes, devalues our life and pushes us into the background.
And excludes us and hides us, locks us away. So I think the big thing as well, the common ground for that on those particular issues often is, for me as well, is again this institutionalisation and the constant threat of it maybe happening as well. It's very difficult to live with, I think. And so again, it's so from where some people, but if we don't get those opportunities to be together, we don't realise that we have those common issues. So you'll have disabled wheelchair users maybe with certain impairments on one side going, oh no, people might lock us away. They don't do that to anyone else. And on the same side, we might have people in the mental health system who are being locked away and saying no one does this to anyone else. And I think it's so important that we recognise that these two things come from exactly the same place. We're just being sorted by impairment. It's the same thing for the same reason. There is no difference apart from what I think are minor details. And again, and it helps as well, I think, us make the jumps to other movements too. So like we see this kind of pipeline to institutionalisation for a lot of disabled people, a lot of people with all kinds of different impairments. That's a threat for. But also we have that in common with people of colour who are dealing with a pipeline to often prison and other institutions, and who also will be more likely to be institutionalised as disabled people. So you're more likely, if you're a person of colour, you're more likely to end up with the police called instead of an ambulance when you need help. This causes, so these two, the experience of being from these two different marginalised communities kind of compounds it. So I think all this learning, it helps us understand each other, but then also I think understand other movements and find common ground with them. I'd like to see a lot more co-working going on about that, you know, for people starting to see the link between things like being a refugee, about seeking asylum, about being put in detention camps, about prison, about other institutions like nursing homes and mental health institutions and so on. Because again, they're all part of the same process. They're just, it's like a different brand. It's like when you buy washing powder and you're overwhelmed because there's so many ways to institutionalise so many people. You're like, oh my God, these look almost the same. They've just got different names on. And that, to me, that's what it's like. And I think it's very important we recognise that, because everything is always individualised to us as disabled people. We're always told our problems are because of us. They're because of our impairments. We can't get in and we can't get involved. We can't be part of everything because of these impairments. And to recognise that it's part of a massive social system that is involved with capitalism and eugenics, both of these things together, is why we're all in this situation. I think it's got to be of massive benefit to us individually, but also from a kind of campaigning point of view. You know, if we don't understand that, if people still go around, like we had this yesterday, you know, well, they wouldn't commit, you know, we wouldn't abort fetuses just because they're LGBT. Well, yes, we damn well would. And yes, we damn well would, because it's the child's of colour, if we thought we could get away with it. And, you know, other communities face the same issues too, and they come from exactly the same place. So the eugenics that we face as working class people, the eugenics we face as disabled people, the eugenics that people of colour face, they're all part of the same deal. And I am ranting, but I do think this is really important.
It's a good one. It is important. Disabled activism has changed a lot in the last 20 years, and I think Disabled People Against the Cuts has kind of led the way in a new brand, if you like, of disability activism. When did you first start getting involved in DPAC?
So I think in the year that DPAC, I think was, if I'm correct, sorry, I think we started in kind of 2009, 2010. So DPAC started kind of just as Dan finished, and I wasn't involved in setting up. I was very busy at that time, but I probably would have got involved if I'd been around. I got involved a couple of years in with DPAC, and yes, we've got a slightly different style of protesting, and we've got a particular focus on particular issues, which Although saying that, we we stretch that as far as possible anyway. So our like what we include and what that defines is kind of up to us. So especially because we have lots of local chapters. So in Manchester Disabled People Against Cuts, which I'm most involved in, as well as sometimes the national stuff, we will interpret our kind of remit as we like. So, for example, autistic activists came to us recently and said, we want to do a campaign. It's about what happened at Mendip House, which had a massive scandal in the press because people were being harmed in the institution, which was an institution for people with autism and learning difficulties. And if it had been Dan, we'd have just been like, yep, that's part of our Free Our People campaign, but we're on that. Whereas we're DPAC, so I was kind of like, yeah, we really want to do that, when we all got together at our meeting, but like, does it fit our remit? And everyone was like, yeah, it fits our remit. Whatever fits our remit is we like. Okay, fine. Well, that's good. So then we all went and joined in. But that's like, so yeah, we say we're against the cuts, but really, we're against things that the cuts are caused by. So that doesn't mean we'll exclude things that are not strictly about the cuts.
Yeah.
And also, obviously, the cuts themselves, we could say, affect how care is being delivered in the institutions as well. It's also causing us to be institutionalised more. So to me, that's still part of our campaign. But yeah, mainly we campaign at government against the cuts themselves.
Right, yeah. In some senses, to be a disabled person is to be an activist, because we're so much at the bottom rung of the ladder, and
we'll have to fight for everything or die. It really is. It's like fight or die. It is fucking hard sometimes.
It's a constant struggle because we can't just be people.
No. It's sometimes you just want to melt away, don't you? And you really wish you could. Like the other day, a thing happened, and I'm always telling people how glad I am to be alive, how my life gets better every day. But even I have moments when I'm like, people usually say to me, oh, you're so happy every time I see you. And I'm happy because I'm out. I'm happy because I've got my electric wheelchair. I can get about now. My life is better. But like then the other day, I did twice in a row, couldn't get a taxi to take me off a rank. Normally, I would just shake it off. I'd go for the third taxi. Might be getting more impatient by then, but just some days you just don't feel like it, do you? I kind of was like, okay, I can't do this. And I wheeled round the corner and had a cigarette and texted my friend and went, I don't know what to do, I just want to go home. Yeah, I think we all have moments when we're just like, I just can't do this all the time, because it's humiliating as well. You've got to fight for every single thing. There was people stood by watching me fail to get both these taxis, and you could see they knew that I was just being lied to. And you see them going, oh no, and like, I don't know, normally I might chat to them about it and try another taxi and try and, but just this one day, sometimes you get bloody sick of it. And it's no wonder that so many of us do have times when we might feel, like, that we might not feel like we want to go on anymore, but if people just stop treating us the way they do, I think a lot of us would feel that way a lot less,
Yeah, absolutely.
So you also wanted to talk about Peterloo, didn't you?
Yeah, because I loved that story that you told. Was it Jeremy Deller, I think, who was commissioned to erect this statue. This
erection, let's call it an erection. This monument, yeah.
To commemorate, to remember the Peterloo Massacre, and was it 100? Was it 100 years or 150 years? I can't remember.
It was. We just celebrated the bicentenary, 200 years since the massacre. So, and it's very interesting this, because while it's not, I usually stick to campaigning about issues that I think are really crucial to our lives. Not things that I think are sticking plasters. Ordinarily, I wouldn't be that interested in a monument, but I do think this monument is really important. And hopefully it'll be apparent why when I tell you more about it. But I didn't know who Jeremy Deller was before this monument was made. But I hear he makes politically kind of motivated art. And so he designed what is a lovely monument, as long as stairs are okay for you. So, but the concept of what the monument is, which I'd like to talk about first, because I think it's ingenious, and this is why I'm involved in campaigning about it. When he was given the brief to design a monument, he was asked not to make something figurative, so not something that was a statue of people being slaughtered, because we have one of those in Preston already to the Peterloo Massacre, so we don't want to just replicate previous ideas. And what he came up with, the concept he came up with as an artistic concept, is absolute brilliance. So his concept was, this monument could be a platform. This monument could be a platform that the people of Greater Manchester and beyond can use to rally on, to speak from. Because the key thing about the Peterloo Massacre was about how, like one of the key things at least, as well as slaughtering the crowd on the day when people were gathered to hear political activists speak about politics and their right to involvement in democracy, the speakers were cut down on the platform, and they were slaughtered, cut to pieces with sabres by the army, who'd been sent in by the local judge and the council. And so this idea of providing, so the monument then being a platform that people can speak from, is so powerful. It is a powerful idea in itself. In relation to the story that it's about, it's extremely powerful, because it's like a kind of reparation to kind of say, look, you know, Manchester, we did this thing. We acknowledge we did this thing and it was bad, and the only thing we can do now is help you participate in local democracy. I think that is a bloody brilliant idea. I just love the idea. The only problem with the idea was how that was realised. Was a monument of, or is a monument of steps. It's a circular, it's like discs of steps that get smaller towards the top, like a tower. I always call it Peterloo Tower, just for fun. It's not really called Peterloo Tower. And it actually kind of looks a bit like a plinth. But the idea is, instead of having a statue on top, or an object like with the fourth plinth, that what goes on top of it is people. We rally from it, but also in between the rallies we use it as something that the public can inhabit. That was part of his phrase. The idea of the monument is that the public should inhabit it. It's not just to be looked at. So that was great, except for the fact that a tower of steps with no braille map, because there's a lot of markings on it. If things are directional, they point towards certain places. There are many names on it, engraved on the sides of the steps. There are symbols on the top of the steps. There's no braille key to it or raised map anywhere. It's steps, so no one who can go up steps, everyone who can't use steps can't use it, which keeps being minimised to wheelchairs can't go up it, which is really not the case. This is about much more than wheelchair users. It affects a lot of people with mobility impairments, a lot of people with visual impairments, and so on. So then they were told while it was being designed that steps might not be a great idea, but unfortunately, as is often the case, people don't listen to just a few disabled people. So by the time the wider campaign was going, they had not told us. They were already paying builders and that we couldn't stop it. So we tried to campaign for them not to build it and not to carry it on as it got taller and taller, because we went back every week. We still go back every Thursday for a vigil, and we will until we know what's happening. The stage we're at now is the council have agreed to make it accessible. They're saying fully accessible. They offered us 7 possible solutions. Then a month later they told us only one of them was possible, which we said, but that one is not a good idea. So we've asked them to look at more. So that's where we're at the moment. We haven't found an actual solution. They are now saying they won't rush forward to just another, cock-up, because they've spent £1 million on this, that they will make sure they design it properly. So we don't know when it will be ready, but we are still holding out in hope for a solution. But we'll see what happens there, because that's still going.
One of the things that really impresses me about you is the fact that you're very eloquent, but the way that you join the dots in so many things, and you're involved in so many different strands of activism. And there's the art activism as an artist. There's the activism as a disabled activist, but also your trans activism.
Yeah.
And
also I get a bit involved a little bit sometimes in climate activism, and also have been known to support at the back on the odd Black Lives Matter campaign as well. I love Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like being involved in a few different. I'm kind of a bit of a jack of all trades. You know, a lot of people specialise. I'm not really very specialised, and I'm not trained in anything. So, kind of just pick up where I think it's useful. I drop in and out. So, and I love doing the arts, and I like making that connection, because for me, the art I do is absolutely 100% connected to my activism, and it's all about fighting back. And where I can, I make tools and pass those on, because I think music and poetry as well are both the same, really, in this sense that they help give people political ideas in an easy to swallow soundbite. You know, it's like having a nice sweet breakfast cereal. It's easier for a lot of us to learn that way than maybe from an academic text, which other people also learn really well from. So I think having a selection of ways we can learn helps all of us. And I always learn a lot from arts. I pick up ideas from that, and then I will go and ask questions and find out more as well. So I think it doesn't, because it's just brief, doesn't make it not useful. It just means that that brief idea might take you further to more detailed information. And it does all connect together, everything from the grassroots all the way up to, you know, as we were talking about before, the kind of that top layer in academia. You know, I think it's really important that we're engaged on all levels, because without a bit of everything, I hear a lot of people sort of say there's like this one way or that one way, and this is the way we should do it. And I think actually what we need is lots of ways, because lots of people, everyone's different. So different things speak to different people. And a lot of my art, one thing though I think I don't do, and probably should do more, and I want to try and engage with more, is I've tended to stick within what I know some other artists I won't name just because it'll sound bad, would say is kind of, I stay a bit in the ghetto of disability art. So I tend to aim, my arts work tends to be aimed at disabled people, not anybody else. I really couldn't care less if anybody else notices it or likes it. They're not supposed to care. So it's kind of that I should probably expand a bit more, which is possibly why I found it so exciting working on a non-disability project for a change just recently with the Peterloo thing.
You say that how much you love the Black Lives Matters campaigns.
Oh my God,
and I've it's always been a real concern of mine that disability arts as a movement has been so deathly white.
Yeah.
And the struggle to include diaspora.
Exactly. Yeah.
Has been it has been difficult, and I'd love for disability arts to be more connected with the Black Lives Matters.
Me too. Yeah.
What's been your experience of those campaigns?
A bit like Dan, I love Black Lives Matter because it reminds me a bit. It's very. They do have kind of Dan-style tactics. You know, they don't mess around. They just do it. And they will break the law, and they will be strong, and they will say strong things, and I think it's really important that we support them. So I really only have been involved a little bit kind of on a local level mainly, and although I've been other places with kind of, you know, things like when I heard the young women were setting up a group, I was like, hey, have you got photocopy? I mean, you know, have you got access to printer? Because I've got a great laser printer. I can print you 1,000 leaflets. They're like, that'd help, yeah. So just little bits of help like that. And then just being there at the back. Not exactly holding people's coats, but just showing some solidarity, you know. I don't think it would be good if they were swamped with white people trying to show solidarity necessarily. So if there was a lot, then perhaps I would just leave it. But I think it is important that at least some of us kind of turn up and go, you know, this is right. You know, we need radical activism in all movements. And I think that's why I think Black Lives Matter is a very important campaign. And I think also, again, because it's focused on stuff I think is really, really important, the stuff about the guts of our lives and guts of people's lives in general, because the stuff Black Lives Matter talk about is about that edge, about the threats to people's lives just because of being someone of colour. I think back to the arts question, I think that's really important, and this is why, one of the reasons why I wanted to get involved in joining in with the Disability Arts online the Disability Arts Online Committee.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really important that multiply marginalised disabled artists have got a strong presence in the arts world, and I think we've got a way to go on some fronts, especially for people of colour.
Yeah.
And we need to work out the answer to that. And I certainly don't know it, because I don't think any white artist is going to come along going, hey, I know the answer, because that's just not how it works.
No,
but what we've got to do is be getting the people in who can do that. And I think
it's got to be a conversation, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's got to be about collective getting together and putting stuff on the table and kind of recognizing the different levels of privilege.
Yeah.
I think it's really.
Well, see,
really
I've joined
important.
the committee because I do experience multiple marginalisation, because I'm trans and I'm also disabled and all of that stuff. I'm multiply marginalised, but I'm still white. However, I am a supporter and an ally to other campaigns. I try to be, which, by the way, isn't just about sort of turning up at a protest or buying a T-shirt now and again. It's also about the work you do on the side. So I do also a lot of on the side. I do a lot of quietly. I also do some peer activism, peer support work, and that now I only do with multiply marginalised disabled people, because the demand is so high. So there are ways that we need to support people that aren't just all out the front going, I bought the T-shirt, I turned up at the protest. It's a lot more than that, and we've got a lot of work to do, and I think we're only just beginning to find out what that work is from people.
Dennis Queen, it's been fabulous talking to you. It's been a brilliant discussion, and the conversations that we've had as a group with Sick Festival has been really very inspiring, and the next challenge, I think, is to how we continue these conversations and how we broaden them out, how we include more people with colour and more people learning difficulties into the mix.
Oh, I really agree, and thank you for having me. It's always awesome to talk to you. You know, I do love a good ramble, darling, so.
So yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you, darling.
Visit greyeye.org and disabilityarts.online for details of productions, events, interviews, opinions, reviews and learning opportunities.
Time for a quick break to tell you about an upcoming Grey Eye production. Time for a quick break to tell you about an upcoming Grey Eye production.